Thanks, Rod. If I can go ahead and get Ray Firstenow and Kurt Marlowe up here, we will start with the previously scheduled program and hear a little bit more about where the NRC is in regards to advanced nuclear, new nuclear development, and the regulatory process.
Just have a seat here, right? Good morning. I'm Kurt Marlowe. I'm representing the Idaho Advanced Energy Consortium. My day job is with Boston Government Services. We perform a lot of probabilistic risk analysis. We do safety analysis and licensing support for the Department of Energy and a lot of the reactor and fuel companies in the industry. And so it's an exciting opportunity to, we've spent most of this meeting talking about the word licensing, and I think I've heard the word licensing hundreds of times during this meeting. We speak a lot about the NRC. We speak a lot about how we're going to navigate the NRC or work with the NRC, and I think that relationship that in maybe historically hasn't been treated like a partnership. I think we're reaching a new phase in the industry where we recognize that the U.S. Nuclear Commission is really a partner for us. For many of our companies, we have now developed a very different relationship, I think, in the last couple of decades, maybe than historically we have had. Rather than seeing them as a regulator, we now see them as a partner to be able to bring our projects to fruition and actually deploy reactor and fuel projects. And so I'm very excited to have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Ray Firstenow from the NRC. He's got some slides to show us, and then we'll probably have an opportunity for some questions. So be thinking about some interesting and difficult questions for Ray. So turn the time over to him.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Get started here. Again, I'm Ray Firstenow. I'm the acting executive director for operations at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And in my past life, I was with the Department of Energy for over 30 years. And most of that time was at the Idaho National Lab with the DOE office there. So I'm very familiar with the Department of Energy activities. And I've been with the NRC for about 6 years. Kurt, I think you said something very important as far as we really are partners in this in the future. We about have to be to make it successful as a regulator and advancing nuclear. Again, the NRC is not a promoter of nuclear energy. We have no preferences. We're not promoting it, but we do and we should enable the safe use of nuclear technologies, both existing technologies and new. So our mission statements indicated here of licensing and regulating the civilian use of radioactive materials to provide reasonable assurance of adequate protection. And that term's kind of important in NRC speak because it's always debatable what is reasonable assurance, and it's meant to be flexible like that. Reasonable assurance doesn't mean absolute assurance. We're never gonna get there, but it's adequate, a reasonable assurance of adequate protection. And what we do regulate is the reactors and materials as well as waste activities. So I'll go on to the next slide if I get this. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's hard to read, but some of you may not be familiar with the NRC structure and how it's organized. But the top line there are the commissioners themselves. There's ideally there's five 5 commissioners. They're nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, and they have 5-year terms, and each one of those terms stagger. So there's one come up for renomination every year. And right now we're vacant one position, so there's 2. Currently, they're Chair Hansen. He's a Democrat, and there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republican on the commission right now, and there's 1 vacant. And then I'm below that, and when you talk about the commission, sometimes there's a confusion of terms. The commissioners are those top 5 people. The commission staff are the folks that work under my organization, and we're really doing the licensing work, the inspection work, and the oversight work. And what so the licensing activities, whether they're for the reactors, for material licensees, for fuel fabrication, is all done under my organization. Then there's also regional offices. So I kind of equate those to like maybe the DOE site offices in the DOE complex. And there's, I know, resident inspectors at all of the commercial power plants in the U.S. It's kind of like a site representative in the DOE complex as well. So that the organization total, we're about count all the regions, about 2,700 or so. Right. I'm going to spend a little time. Kurt and I talked about this before, and thought you might want to hear a little bit about our reactor licensing processes. And there's 2 that are currently in place, what's called 10 CFR Part 50, and that's where most of the reactors in operation right now from the 60s and 70s, 80s, and 90s were licensed under Part 50. And that included a construction permit and as well as an operating license. So it's a 2-part process. And all the test reactors, absent the DOE reactors are all regulated by the Department of Energy, but university reactors and, for example, the new Hermes test reactor that's in Tennessee are being regulated under 10 CFR Part 50. So it's a 2-part licensing process. Then later in the late 80s, the Part 52 was developed, which Vogtle 3 and 4 were done under Part 52, and NuScale as well. So that's like a design certification application. So you get a design cert, and if you reference that, and it was meant to allow for standardization of design. So if a design was certified by the NRC and an applicant, whoever that is, wanted to use that, then that had some finality to it. As long as you use that design, that couldn't be debated anymore in court. That was good. And then also under Part 52, they had the early site permits. So you can get a lot of the environmental work done under an early site permit. Again, that takes some of the uncertainty out of the regulatory process with an early site permit. And COL is called a combined operating license, which once you get a COL, it's this one part. So you get a certification of the design, you get a COL, and then you build a plant and good to go. And that works for in material licensing as well. Under Part 53, that's the new licensing framework that's being developed, and it was being done to support new advanced reactors. And right now, advanced reactors, non-light water reactors, large light water reactors, again, Part 50 and 52 were developed with large light water reactors in mind, are very good for that. But Part 53, we've had such a wide variety of concepts and designs and fuel and coolants that they're all different with respect to their safety characteristics and how they're operated. So we need a much more flexible framework to operate under, and that's being called Part 53. And that has to be completed by 2027 based on direction from Congress, and we're well on our way to doing that. The project right now, the Commission gave us direction on the development of the proposed rule for Part 53. We intend to have that out for public comment later this year. A couple of activities that aren't in reactor licensing, but in the discussions yesterday, we heard from fuel fabricators as well, and conversion and deconversion, those type of activities. For example, conversion, deconversion activities, for example, the Honeywell plant, that's regulated under 10 CFR Part 40. Enrichment facilities like Urenco and Centrus and GNF are enrichment facilities regulated under 10 CFR Part 70. And then you have fresh fuel fabricators. We heard from Framatome yesterday, and there's GNF and BWXT among others. TriSoX is another one, and Kairos, Atlas. They all are regulated under 10 CFR Part 70 as well. And then we haven't talked much about it, but reprocessing facilities are currently regulated under 10 CFR Part 50, but staff is looking at whether those can be regulated under Part 70 as well. But the importance in all of these, whichever process an applicant tends to choose, I would stress the importance of this. I don't like it to be an inference that because we're talking on the second day that we should be an afterthought. We should have been on the first day, Kara. So no, I'll make a pitch for that. But the importance of really of early and often discussions with the NRC and pre-application activities, that's so important. And because I know the regulator can be viewed by developers as a risk, and how do you help retire that risk? And we really want to help do that. And early and often communications is important. We have what we call drop-in meetings, where just to get acquainted with you, whoever it is, we're always willing to do that. And then there's activities like white papers, and those are more papers that are developed. We'll give informal feedback on those, and that can help later on if the applicant decides to develop topical papers, which are formal. We do review those and give our approval of those, and then applicants can use those as a reference in their application, and those help give some finality to technical issues in particular. So again, I wanted to stress the importance of early interactions with the NRC. Okay, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but on the framework of Part 53, it really builds on a foundation of commission policies and decisions. So the commission, the 5 commissioners, they make decisions on policy. So staff will develop vote papers that looking at to ask the commission to make policy decisions. We'll give options of what we think as a staff. They may choose one of those options. They may have different options to choose from. But when we get those policy decisions, then it's our job under my organization to implement those and develop guidance to help implement those policy decisions. And we try under Part 53, you heard about probabilistic risk assessment. Part 53 relies heavily on that if you develop a PRA, and they're also performance-based. So we really want to have a balance in Part 53 as we're developing that rule between flexibility and predictability. So I think there were different slides presenting this different, and my apologies if I've forgotten somebody, because the landscape is changing rapidly. ALO was not on here. I just heard about ALO today. That's not on our list. But the importance was not to include everybody necessarily, but just to show the wide variety of of the advanced reactor landscape, and you heard about this yesterday and today. Of course, there's pressurized water reactors, boiling water reactors, which we are very familiar with in licensing at the NRC. There's sodium-cooled, lead-cooled, trisul fuel. The fuel types are, as you've heard, are many and varied. And when we look at safety in a way, the fuel really is the source term. When you look at what we're interested from a regulator is that source term and the consequences of the release of that source term in the event of an accident. So the fuel does matter. It's probably one of the bigger areas. But advanced reactors have at least have the promise of being as safe or safer than current commercial light water reactor designs, but they haven't been built yet either. So we're waiting to see. But again, that early and often communications with the NRC is important. I do want to point out on this as well how we're trying to get ready, because we understand the regulator in the end sometimes might be on critical path for stuff. But what we want to do is get off critical path as soon as possible. So part of doing that is trying to be ready for the applications, no matter who's coming in. We really treat everybody the same. But how do you get ready for all these technologies? How do you staff up and in the right areas? So it's a little bit of a guessing game, because we're trying to budget resources 2 years in advance. But again, that's why it's important to engage with the NRC early, so we can get the right expertise on board. In my previous job at the NRC as director of research, we interface with the Department of Energy quite a bit, and we do as well in the licensing. We look at DOE as kind of a little bit of a barometer of what's the landscape of things to come. Where's the money being invested? What research activities are being done? Because in the research area, and as a regulator, what we're really looking to do is, when we do our confirmatory analysis and confirmatory research, is trying to understand and quantify where we can uncertainties in designs of something that hasn't been built yet. And we use modeling and simulation tools that many of them are helped developed by the labs, and trying to understand what parameters, what phenomena in a particular reactor design are important to safety. And that's what we spend our time on. Scenarios or phenomena that might not be important to safety from a risk standpoint, then we should be spending less time on that and really focusing as a regulator on those phenomena and those scenarios that really affect safety. And we're doing that through developing reference plant models, we call them, for the different reactor types, so we can understand what those uncertainties are. But again, one thing that really helps us in being prepared for advanced reactor designs is good data. And that's really we really rely on the developers for providing data. A concept is nice, but final design is much nicer, and data to show how your design's going to be performed, and then us being able to take that data and model it in our confirmatory analysis goes a long way. A concept without data or without final design is nice, but you need much more than that to get a license. And this is just a little different look at how many players are out there, and many of them have spoken at this conference, but we are engaged with all of these folks and many others at the various steps in the licensing process, whether pre-application or in the actual application phase. For example, with Kairos Hermes test reactor, we have completed the review of the construction permit for Hermes 1, and we are now looking at Hermes 2, the second reactor at that same site, and we're looking at maybe a 14-month, we just received that not too long ago, and maybe a 14-month review cycle for that. Again, those are test reactors. This is just presented, again, a different way, but it really shows how many activities, how many different reactor types we're really reviewing at the same time with all different concepts, and all the concepts are different. I mentioned topical reports and white paper reviews. Those are really important to help bring some finality to technical issues before applications are actually sent in. And we're trying to increase our licensing efficiencies. I think you heard throughout the last couple of days where we need much more than one of a kind on these. We're looking at nth of a kind, and how do we prepare ourselves as a regulator to be able to review these licensing activities and better our efficiency on how long it takes, how many resources are done to look at new applications. So we're using core review team concepts to keep the same people on a review, so we don't have to always bring in new people or train new people during a license application review. Where I mentioned the Part 53 rulemaking activities, and then we develop guidance documents that are really a kind of a subset of the rulemaking, if you will, that provides developers with more guidance as far as what's acceptable to the NRC. So we know we're on task and realize that the pressure is going to get more, not less, as we develop advanced reactor concepts or current licensing activities for license renewals for existing light water reactors, power uprates, you name it. That all requires licensing action, and we need to be able to perform on our part as well, and we're preparing to do that. So hold us to task on that, as you engage us. It helps when you have good applications, take advantage of white papers, pre-application activities, a good review plan, and that makes a huge difference as far as how many resources it takes for the NRC to review those applications and to issue licenses. All right, public participation. This was meant to be a busy slide, and I'm not going to go over all of it, but it gives you an idea of the different steps or the different points where public can get involved with NRC, and I encourage communities or developers or whoever to really take a look at our website and our interactions, and don't hesitate to contact us about public meetings, hearings going on, what's in our public document room. We, as a lot of agencies and companies have, we have a lot of different websites. There's a lot of good information on www.nrc.gov that can really help communities and developers help navigate the sometimes confusing regulatory process. So. And I think I wanted to conclude with just thanking the ECA for inviting me to attend. And no offense that I was on the second day, so that's all right. So, and there's a lot of good information on the website. And Kirk, I think we might have time for a few questions.
Yeah, I guess I'll. Oh, thanks. There were a couple of pointed questions that I was going to ask Ray, and I don't know if Ray wants to open it up for floor questions. But one of the questions, I mean, considering the huge number of elected officials, we got folks representing a large number of, historically Department of Energy communities here. And I think one of the questions that comes up, I see somebody like Kemmer, Wyoming, right? And we've got communities similar to Kemmer who raise their hand and say, okay, I'm interested in putting a reactor in the community. What do I need to do? And one of the topics that's been brought up at this meeting is the early site permit, early site license concept, and maybe just a brief mention of, if a a community wants to put a reactor in their community and they want to be prepared, or they want something to be able to attract reactor developers to their community, what action can they do to engage the NRC with that?
Well, you mentioned the early site permit, and I mentioned it briefly on one of the slides. It's part of the Part 52 regulations. That kind of what that does is get some of the environmental activities out of the way, and they're very important. But that's many times that is the long pole in the tent to getting a facility licensed and built, or the NEPA activities. An early site permit helps to envelope. What it does is kind of, you might not know exactly what design you want to do yet exactly, but it's a kind of an enveloping activity that prepares a particular site for the deployment of a reactor type. And then once you've decided on what reactor type and it fits within the envelope, that part has some finalization to it anyway, because again, regulatory activities are part of risk, and whether it's with developers or with communities, you want to retire risk as early as possible, and that's one method to do it is like an early site permitting activity.
Are there any floor questions at this time? I have one more observation that I guess I would make. You know, it seems interesting at this point in the industry's history. Historically, I think a lot of developers pointed to the NRC as the main source of schedule delay. I think it's interesting now that many of these reactor developers are a little farther down the path, and we're now seeing that it actually supply chain, design issues, staffing. I mean, there are a number of other issues that are now starting to take precedent over licensing. Would you attribute some of that to a renewed interest by the administration to fund the NRC, better funding, better staffing? Is that part of being able to be more efficient and faster?
Yeah, Kurt, I think that's part of it. I think it's. I think we need at the NRC, is like everywhere, be good anticipators. Try to read the tea leaves, if you will, as far as what's out there to come, and get prepared and get resources. It was mentioned, getting the right people, the amount of people resources we're all going to need. We're all competing for the same as well, and with NRC's no exception. Actually, today NRC's hosting an expo in a hotel near the NRC to try to bring in new folks into the NRC to help build up that expertise, and we're hoping to get maybe 40 or more people out of that expo. So we're trying to staff up. But with the NRC, it's kind of an interesting, we're a fee-based organization, so we have to recover our costs, most of them through the fee structure. So we have to be careful on general fees, we call them, that's called Part 171, and then specific fees when we charge applicants for licensing activities or oversight activities is called Part 170. But when you're taking that all together, we have to collect most of our budget through fees. And so we're always trying to predict what that's going to be 2 years in advance, and then that gets adjusted throughout the year. But with regard to resources, I think we're ready to take any application right now. But as we develop like the new rules and experience in licensing reviews, we're going to get better. And I think we have to. Otherwise, as we look ahead with the number of applications we're seeing in, we'll get drowned if we don't get better. So.
Yeah. Let's take a question here. Yes, thank you very much. Let's see. Doesn't work? Okay.
Turn it on. Okay, thank you. There's a button. Thank you very much, Stefan Meyer, IEA. Thank you very much for the presentation. One question: to what extent Will you look at the details of end-of-life decommissioning plans to issue a license? And how much detail, so it's a linked question, how much detailed information have you seen so far when some of the designs that you review or pre-review have submitted, and what types of radioactive waste streams they will produce and how these will be managed?
That's a good question. I'm going to have to admit to start, before I start the question, that's an area I have less familiarity with. But I think, in the decommissioning plans and how to handle the waste streams and particularly spent fuel is how do you manage that on site? Because recognizing we don't have interim storage capability right now in the U.S., we don't have a permanent repository, but we do, goes to waste confidence rules, so is that the waste confidence rule is also known as the continued storage of spent nuclear fuel rule, and looking at how that can be stored safely on site until interim storage or a permanent repository. So we have to look at the new concepts. What is that source term of the fuel? What is the type? How does that age in storage of cask? And how do we certify safe storage of the new activities? That's very important because source term is different. The radionuclides are different. The heat term is different. So we have to look at that as we evaluate applications. So I know that didn't completely answer your question, but
maybe just to follow on, how much detail do you see in these preliminary reviews that you get to do related specifically to spent fuel management and rad waste management?
I really I'd love to get back to you on it because I haven't.
Sorry,
looked at
thank
that,
you.
so.
One over here.
Yeah, my question, is that working? My question relates to the ALO model. It's a two-part question. One is the NRC prepared to permit a production line type of reactor that basically says any reactor that comes off of this production line is permitted? And then the follow-on to that is, how does the site permitting go if you buy one of the production line permitted reactors?
There's actually a lot to that question, and we are looking at that right now. We're developed a microreactor paper to the commission right now, is with the commission looking at policy issues that involve, the manufacturing licenses. How do you treat a reactor coming off an assembly line like a microreactor, and how is it licensed for transport, and really looking at that whole process, because we really haven't done that before, and it's going to be essential that we look at that differently than what we're looking at things now. So we're right in the middle of that, actually, those same questions, and there's a lot of issues that go along with that.
Thank you, sir.
I apologize. It sounds like we just got time for one more question. So,
Thanks. This is a communities conference, so I was wondering, as things get further along and there's more advanced reactors being deployed, there's going to be a lot more town halls happening. What is the role of the NRC in answering safety questions for reactors that they've licensed in town halls?
Yeah, I think there's a public meeting process, and one of the last slides I show show how to get involved in there. There are as we're developing papers at the NRC, there's a lot of opportunity for public participation. One thing I've noticed, my time at the NRC, we have public meetings on just about everything. And as we're reviewing applications, there's lots of opportunities. So I'd encourage you to get involved and stay tuned in with upcoming public meetings, and you can tune in virtually. That's what's nice about technology now. You can turn in and you can hear the type of questions that are being asked of developers or of licensees as we're in the licensing process. So it's just not the formal environmental reviews, for example. It's all along in the process. There's lots of opportunities for public participation and input.
So when people ask questions, the licensee answers them, not the NRC?
It depends on who's the question's for. It could be for the NRC.
Okay.
Could be for the licensee as well.
Great. I was just thinking as an independent third party. Just
Sure. I mean, and ask whatever question you want, and then who's the appropriate organization to answer it. Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
I apologize for cutting off any of the other questions, but you're going to be here for the rest of the day, Ray?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we just really appreciate Ray's participation with us today. The great opportunity to hear from him. And I would make a plug. Many of you watched the video of what was happening in the Netherlands. And so as you brought up public meetings, I think the opportunity for communities to take a little bit more advanced role rather than waiting for an NRC public meeting or a NEPA public meeting, I think we got a really good view of what a proactive community can do to say, if we're interested in putting a reactor, let's get feedback. And that is something that maybe we'll have more opportunity to talk about to this group at some point. But thank you very much, Ray. Appreciate it.
If I can get the next panel to come up, and I did also just want to add that Natalia Sarajeeva, Natalia, can you put your hand up real quickly? So Natalia is the ECA Sherpa, if you will, through the Office of Nuclear Energy, and one of the things that we've been doing is hosting webinars on advanced